The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
Life Given, the promise and perils of egg donors for couples who want children. Terrorism and immigration. Should Illinois limit or welcome more refugees from the Middle East? And this long-suffering Illinois city is seeing glory days again, just in time for the holidays. All of this and more on today's In the Loop. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lauren Cohn. The demand for donor eggs has never been higher. Tonight, Barbara Pinto joins us with a closer look at an industry that is fulfilling dreams and generating controversy.
Thanks, Lauren. Human egg donation is an $80 million business in America and a growing trend. This completely anonymous process is a lifeline to a biological family for same-sex couples, cancer survivors, and women who delay childbearing or struggle with fertility. But this answer for childless families in Chicago and around the country is also raising questions.
25-year-old Chicago resident Paige Kopecki is a nursing student. Joy Garcia, an event planner from the Quad Cities, is 27. Both of these young women have decided to go through the medical and surgical process necessary to donate their eggs.
The ability to potentially give life, to a couple who can't conceive, I think was the utmost appeal. I'd be lying if I said that, the compensation for it wasn't, attractive. The first cycle, it was $7,000, and then it's increased $500 each cycle.
Each egg donation is called a cycle. Joy has done 4 so far, using the money to pay off college loans and a car. Paige, who earned between $7,000 and $10,000 per cycle, has done more, giving at least 2 complete strangers successful pregnancies.
I don't see it as my child out there. I'm not raising them. I was able to help and give this gift, but it's definitely not my child. You start out on 2 injections. The first is called Follistim.
For nearly 3 weeks, donors inject themselves with hormones. They're carefully monitored with blood tests and ultrasounds, then undergo a minor surgical procedure to retrieve their eggs.
There are people that, do it once and that's enough for them. And then there are people like me who had a great experience through it all, and I completed 6 cycles and was very happy with each one.
It does take a little bit of a toll on your body. Fortunately, I've always been really active and healthy. I take good care of myself. So I think that is a reason why I'm able to bounce back so quickly.
Robin Von Holly founded Alternative Reproduction Resources, one of the first egg donation agencies in Illinois, after her own struggle with infertility. Her agency rigorously screens prospective egg donors, medically, genetically, and psychologically.
We do look for things like if there's 2 people in their family who are alcoholics, we won't use them. We look a lot for the psychological diseases, bipolar, that type of thing, because a lot of that could be very genetic.
Von Holly says she relies on the honesty of the donors.
1, 2, 3.
So do parents Greg Fiacato and Ryan Schmidt of West Suburban Yorkville.
I take it at face value that people are doing it for the right reason, to help somebody else.
Thank you. Here's your flower. Give it to your sisters.
Ryan and Greg are doting dads to 3 beautiful children. Twin girls Chloe and Dakota are 6 months old. Little Greg just turned 2.
Brings a lot of joy, so they're great kids. That's your dress. Good night. You never thought this would be possible, so it's pretty amazing.
This couple, together 14 years, credits the biological family of their own that they've always wanted to a woman they've never met, an anonymous egg donor.
You're going through a bunch of profiles of people you don't know, and potentially picking out someone to have your kid.
And I wanted someone that was Italian or Mediterranean, and then he's Irish, so I wanted someone that was kind of a mix.
This unusual discussion is becoming a more common part of family planning in America. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, donor eggs were used nearly 20,000 times in 2012, a dramatic increase from fewer than 12,000 a decade earlier. Those numbers greatly concern obstetrician and gynecologist Dr. Robert Lawler, who opposes the practice.
It is treating life as a commodity. These situations are becoming more and more like business transactions held between 2 or 3 or more individuals and a host of attorneys and ethicists, and I think that it certainly has become somewhat problematic.
There are other risks as well. 1% of donors come down with serious and potentially life-threatening complications. There is also concern that repeated exposure to the hormones that stimulate egg production could cause cancer later in life.
It's not without risk. It's small, but it's not without risk.
Fertility specialist Dr. Brian Kaplan estimates his practice, using egg donors, is responsible for the births of nearly 10,000 healthy babies.
Babies from egg donation are actually healthier because you're taking eggs from a young woman, and that's probably better from a health point of view, we know that. And a mother might be better at 40 with life experience, maturity, socioeconomically stable, so you actually have the best of nature and the best of nurture.
While the FDA strictly regulates the screening of egg donors, there are only guidelines suggesting women donate eggs no more than 6 times. Paige is now on her 7th cycle, with her doctor's approval. A couple who had used her eggs before requested her again. Paige says she doesn't worry about additional risk.
I'm very blessed to be able to do it for the intended parents and myself as well. There are a lot of benefits that come from it, and thinking that I've helped someone have a child is incredible.
Paige just underwent surgery to have her eggs extracted for the 7th time.
This is absolutely fascinating. Why is the demand for donors so high?
There are a number of factors, but the biggest one is age. More than 20% of American women are waiting till the age of 35 or later, when a woman's fertility is in decline, to start their families. And the science is really remarkable. Doctors found that if they took an egg from a 20-year-old woman, fertilized it, implanted it into a 30, 40, 50-year-old woman, that woman's body would behave as if it's 20 years old, resulting in a successful pregnancy. So it really is incredible.
What is the criteria then for donating?
It's fairly strict. A woman has to be college graduate, 21 years of age, with a body mass index in a certain range. She has to undergo a battery of medical, genetic, psychological testing, fill out a lengthy questionnaire, dialing back her medical history and family medical history, 3 generations, filling out paperwork about her GPA, her interests, her talents, and then subject herself to the medical procedures that take about a month of time to do this.
Such a terrific story. Thank you, Barbara Pinto, for that. Now to the threat of a strike by Chicago public school teachers and the Illinois budget impasse as Illinois House Speaker Mike Madigan calls for the state income tax to go back to 5%.
A good place to begin would be the level we were at before the income tax expired. And starting there, you can go in whatever direction you want to go.
Joining us now are Cliff Kelly, journalist and radio host for WVON 1690 AM, Juan Perez Jr., reporter for the Chicago Tribune, and Kathleen Murphy, director of communications for the Illinois Opportunity Project. Welcome to all of you. So we just heard from Speaker Madigan, back to 5%. Cliff, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I agree with that, but I think what was so funny, Lauren, was the way he said it. You can go start at 5% and go up or down, whichever, and everybody laughed at that. We're in bad shape, and everybody knows it. So I think bringing the income tax back on a progressive stand would be a good thing. We've got to get money. We've got to have more income, without a doubt. There's too many things that we're losing. There are a lot of people hurting. And hopefully that will work out something so that the General Assembly will be able to. They did pass one budget, and Rauner, rather than going to a line item budget, which he could have done, he didn't do that. He just vetoed the whole thing. A lot of people don't know that, but we have to do something, and I think maybe this would work out.
Juan, do you agree with that? Because that sort of appears to be the status quo, continuing to raise taxes.
Well, the Chicago Public Schools certainly need revenue, but as far as the method by which that revenue is going to come up, I'm not sure how exactly that's going to happen. Certainly, the district has asserted that the state needs to step in somehow legislatively to come up with an amount of money to close a massive budget gap that it currently has in its fiscal year budget. And the piece of legislation that's on the floor right now that would provide a framework that the city and the district says is necessary to kind of start down that path is vehemently opposed by the Chicago Teachers Union right now. That counts for something, and that's definitely going to complicate matters.
Well, we're going to talk more about the Teachers Union in a minute, but Kathleen, I want to get back to the budget. Is this Madigan versus Round are beating their chest at this point, but they had the 5% tax, and it didn't really make a difference. We still had a budget crisis.
No, it didn't even make a dent. In 2 years, they took in $31 billion of extra revenue that was supposed to go to pay a backlog of bills. It didn't even make a dent in that. Our unfunded pension liability grew. We added $127 billion to the debt. Our unemployment rates grew because businesses fled the state. We added more people to food stamp rolls than to employment rolls. This is the wrong idea. Mike Madigan has not earned the right to ask the people of this state for more of their hard-earned money. You know, a better place to start would be some new legislators.
I think actually, though, that the Speaker understands the problem, and I know we're going to talk about the school situation, but I don't have any children. But I look on that not as a tax, but as an investment. We have to do something about that. There's so many things, there's so many people who are hurting right now because the services that the state used to provide, they just can't do anymore. And something's got to be done to help that. But there are we got mental health clinics, you've got all kinds of things.
They can't do it anymore because Speaker Madigan's caucus sent a $4 billion a budget that was $4 billion out of balance. They left Springfield on May 31st at the end of session without working out a budget. They submitted unilaterally. They knew he couldn't pass it. So they left without working it out. They knew that they underfunded those social services.
I think you agree now that they have to do something.
But let me ask you this.
I'm not talking about what did happen. I'm talking about what we need to do right now.
Juan, let me ask you this, Is the governor really unreasonable when he's looking for reforms like workers' comp and collective bargaining rights and term limits? Is that really being unreasonable to ask for something in return and then allowing maybe a tax hike to go through?
I don't know about unreasonable. I mean, I don't know if I can really weigh in on whether or not it's deemed reasonable or not. But what I can certainly say, though, is you can see here at the table that there's still going to be a lot of consternation from both sides of the aisle as far as whatever a solution is going to look like here. So it certainly seems like the governor's willing to deal, and I think there are lots of people who are willing to deal. But the question is, how do you arrive at consensus, and what is it going to take to actually get something done here in probably a relatively short period of time, because the clock's ticking.
A lot of the things the governor is asking for, Lauren, have nothing to do with the budget. You know, term limits. What's that got to do with the budget? He's a number of things. He's trying to destroy the union. I say pass the budget, and then you can go to these other things and see where people.
We can't pass a budget that's $4 billion out of balance. I mean, it's not $1 billion where you can maybe work something. It's
how do we work it out
$4 billion.
I think you will agree.
We have to figure out either whether we're going to raise taxes or we're going to cut spending. I mean. And frankly, Speaker Madigan, they don't need their governor. They have veto-proof majorities in both the House and the Senate. They can pass whatever they want. So they can, if they want it, if they want that budget, decide whether you want
thing too, an override, one vote.
Well, you all did bring this up. We brought up the relationship with what's going on in Springfield with what's going on here in terms of our Chicago public school system. And recently, the teachers union's majority says we're okay with a strike. So that potentially could happen as soon as March. Cliff, is that a reasonable position for Karen Lewis and the teachers to take at this point?
Well, I understand because of the pension situation and so forth, but I hope that doesn't happen. And Sharkey said the other day that there is a possibility that it won't. I think that getting the strike vote authorization is just something they can use to show, let's work something out. But I said, we can't, that's going to hurt the children. This is the thing. You know, and I understand the teachers have a major problem, and I understand what the CTU is saying. But I really hope it can be worked out. And seemingly with what the CEO came up with the other day, although it was questionable the way he did it, but...
Well, he's saying 5,000 layoffs could happen even before we get to that point.
I know it, and hopefully that won't happen.
But that would be unfortunate.
It would be.
You bring up a good point in that, you know, what the union announced this week, saying that they have an overwhelming majority of their members are authorizing leadership to go to a strike if necessary. But again, this is a negotiation, and I think we need to be careful not to assume that just because the teachers have the ability to strike now under state law that they will automatically go to strike. For starters, there's months of a legal process that has to play out here, and that's going to be quite a drama on its own. But again, this is still a negotiation, and I think you saw a very calculated move by the Chicago Public Schools CEO, Forrest Claypool, this week, within an hour of the union announcing that they had the strike authorization they needed, coming out and offering a 4-year contract deal, the details of which are still a little bit murky to us. I mean, that's not something he's entirely discussing with the public right now, but certainly saying that this is something that, could provide an opportunity to move forward here, and I think that's a very interesting development.
Kathleen, part of that was rather than just contribute 2% to the pension, the teachers would contribute 9%, which they've said they don't want to do.
Right, and actually, Karen Lewis earlier this year told teachers to set aside 25% of their salary to prepare for a strike. They really don't want to do the pension pickup. The people who get hit on the chin in all of this, though, are the families in this district who on one side have the teachers union who just voted overwhelmingly, 88% voted to strike, to walk out over picking up some extra money that goes into their own retirements in a city that is de facto bankrupt and pretty soon is going to be legally bankrupt. And on the other side, they have CPS, who for decades has sent hundreds of thousands of children into this school system that has failed to bring the majority of them, not a few outliers, not some tough cases, but the majority of them to grade level achievement. So what I would love to see is the families of this district sort of stand up and go, you know what, I'm through with both of you. I'm not going to be a pawn in this game anymore of who gets to be the bureaucrat in charge. Take all of this money that you've been throwing into this failed system, the system that's failed our children, and give it to us to invest in our children the way we see fit. Make the money follow the child like they do like we do at the university level. We have some of the best colleges in the nation. We have the worst K-12 system in the nation.
Well, it certainly seems, Cliff, that the situation is it's never about the children. It's always about the adults.
They're an afterthought.
What I would love to see, we are the only district in the entire state that does not have an elected school board. And that's what we really need. We need an elected school board. A lot of people have said that. We've been trying to do this I was in the city council for years. We tried to do it at that point. But that's what you need. There's no reason. What the system is, it's not good. We agree on that.
Right. And we could talk about this all day. I wish we had more time. But I want to thank all of you for joining us, Cliff Kelly, Juan Perez Jr., and Kathleen Murphy. Now, the debate over whether to accept Syrian refugees is picking up steam in the race for the state Senate seat. Here's Chris Bury with more.
The tide of refugees fleeing war and violence in the Middle East has become a major political issue here in the American Midwest. Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner is among 31 governors ordering temporary bans on new refugees from Syria. Senator Mark Kirk has attacked Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth for her welcoming stance on refugees, and the Syrians seeking shelter in Illinois are caught in the middle. Hilwa Suleiman, her brother and mother, are now living quietly on Chicago's north side. They are among the more than 100 Syrians who have found refuge in Illinois over the last year. Hilwa and her family fled Syria almost 3 years ago after government planes bombed the village where their family had lived for more than 60 years.
It's been very hard on us. How can a person leave her home, which my father and mother are originally from, for 50, 60 years? We were a family that always stuck together. All of our brothers and sisters and our parents were always together in one place. We lived a comfortable life.
For the Suleiman family, crossing the border on foot from northern Syria to Turkey was treacherous.
We had been hearing gunshots and shelling for over a year. At first, they used to target certain people, but then they indiscriminately targeted everyone. We were lucky to leave.
Eventually, they made their way from a border town in Turkey to Istanbul and applied for refugee status with the United Nations. After waiting for nearly 2 years and undergoing multiple screening interviews with U.S. officials, they were allowed to come to Chicago in August. Hilwa's brother, Mohanad, says they were happy to get settled with help on their rent from the state of Illinois.
America is a democratic country with freedom of expression. This is why we were motivated to come to America.
But now Syrian refugees in Illinois are caught in a political firestorm.
ISIS disguised as Syrian refugees attack Paris. Next target, the U.S.
Senator Mark Kirk, entering a tough re-election campaign, is attacking Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth for supporting more refugees in the U.S. But writing in the Tribune, Duckworth said such attacks, quote, are sending a signal that innocent victims fleeing the brutality of the Syrian civil war are not welcome in the United States, which plays right into our enemy's hands. For Hilwa's 81-year-old mother, who left 7 other children behind, the stress is clear. The family is anxious to tell Americans that they are not terrorists, but victims of a civil war.
I hope the American people do not think of the Syrian people as terrorists. On the contrary, Syrians are hospitable and respectful towards everyone. But with the recent situation in Syria, with the foreign militarization, the situation on the ground has become more complex. What's happening to the Syrian people is horrific. There are people that are using the Syrian people's plight to their own advantage.
Now joining me are Richard Longworth, Fellow on Global Cities at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and Lena Sergi Attar, founder and CEO for the Karam Foundation, and welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
So, Lena, the typical family that we saw here in Chicago, is that quite representative of the Syrians who come here?
Absolutely. This is one family out of millions of families who have fled over the last 4.5 years, persecution and terror and aerial bombardment on their cities and their villages, and they flee with their families to neighboring countries first in the hopes that the war will end and they will be able to return to their homes. But what's happening is that the war is not ending, and they want to secure futures for their families and for their children, so they try to go to Europe and they're trying to come to America.
Richard, Governor Rauner has issued a temporary ban on new Syrian refugees into Illinois. What does that mean in practical terms?
I don't know if it means anything in practical terms, whether he can do it, whether any government can do it. It looks more like showboating, more to the point. It damages Illinois. If Governor Rauner really wants to do something for the economy of Illinois, we ought to be welcoming in all the smart, talented people and their children that we can. Not only in Chicago, but there are an awful lot of cities, small towns, rural areas in Illinois that badly need this kind of talent.
Lena, for the families who are coming here, given the political climate, and we've just seen again in a political debate this week where Donald Trump, for example, wants to ban all Muslims from the United States. Senator Cruz saying Christians only. For the families here, what's it like living in that kind of a political climate?
I think it's very stressful for families here, and it's stressful for families that are refugees in neighboring countries who are making that decision to get on these leaky boats to Europe or trying to go through the process of coming to America, because they watch this and they're very afraid of the countries that they're coming to. But Americans should know that every Syrian family that is fleeing Syria right now is fleeing the exact same terror that people here are afraid of, the terror of ISIS, the terror of a government that is bombing them, the terror that we are afraid of. These families are actually fleeing from inside Syria, so there's nothing to fear from these refugees. And I think it's very un-American to not open our borders to people fleeing persecution, and all they want is to live in freedom and in dignity and to provide a future for their families.
But Richard, we did see in the Paris attacks, for example, that at least one of the terrorists may have used the refugee crisis in order to escape. Is some concern about security just natural, given what's going on?
I think it is natural. People are afraid. We are this island nation here, far removed from the rest of the world, and throughout our history we've been terrified whenever any wave of immigrants, Irish, German, more recently Mexican, come here, and after a while we get over it. Now, the possibility of terrorists coming in on this is real. It is a risk, but it is it's a relatively small problem compared to the great benefit that we would get from this wave of refugees, as we've gotten from other waves of refugees in the past. We took in a lot of Vietnamese after the Vietnam War. I expect there were a few Viet Cong in that lot. We took in a lot of European Jews after World War II. May have been a communist or two there. Would we argue that these refugees didn't strengthen our country terrifically in the years after they come. Of course they did.
Lena, for the refugees who are coming here, as we saw with his family, it's a long wait, almost 2 years. What kind of screening do they go through?
They go through a lot of screening processes in Turkey and Jordan and Lebanon, about 18 to 24 months of screening, and they go through every single detail of their lives, and the waiting process is actually very difficult. And we have to remember that the number of refugees that have arrived to America are only around 2,000 out of 4 million Syrian refugees.
So very tiny percentage.
Very tiny percentage. And if people want to know more about the refugees that have been accepted into the United States, go no further than Humans of New York. They're doing a whole series of interviews on Syrian refugees who have already been accepted to come to the United States and are waiting for their final paperwork to come through. And you'll see inspiring stories of innovators, architects, doctors, families.
On that note, we are running out of time, but this issue is going to percolate throughout the 2016 election. So, Richard Longworth and Lena Surgiatar, thanks again for your time. Now to a holiday story that really celebrates the spirit of Christmas. Rockford, Illinois has come through some very tough times, but this year the city has something to really celebrate.
I love you. I love you too.
Sometimes all it takes is a hug and a smile to brave the darkest of times.
I lost a healthy sense of pride in myself in providing for my family.
3 years ago, Adam Stieber lost his job. With 2 young sons and a wife to support, he didn't know how they would make it or if they could even stay in Rockford.
I remember that vividly, having to go down to a food pantry with my son, and he had no clue. He was just happy to be with Dad. But I knew what we were doing down there, and I knew why we were down there.
The Stieber family story is a familiar one in Rockford and had been for decades. John Groh, president and CEO of the Rockford Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, grew up here. He watched Rockford decay into high crime, high poverty, and a lack of jobs.
Through that recession in the 70s and into the early 80s, corporations that were stalwarts of the community, that had employed in individual factories thousands and thousands of people, folded up and left the community.
Rockford slowly started to rebuild. The historic buildings held promise, but its downtown was desolate, hurting the few small business owners like Karen Ellier trying to stay open.
It was just a difficult market 15 years ago to open in because it was a ghost town.
Despite some growth and change, in 2013, Forbes rated Rockford the 3rd most miserable city in America, largely because its high unemployment rate reached 17%. That stigma sparked a community to fight even harder. Rockford's mayor, Lawrence Morrissey, says the focus turned to small business.
We're making opportunities happen for small entrepreneurs, for people who are making products by hand, people that might be part of a local farm co-op, and they're selling food and produce at the local markets. So that's been a very big success for us over the last several years right in our downtown.
Slowly, more people in the Rockford area saw progress was possible, like Vinay and Amanda Pomachan, who took a chance and brought Southeast Asian cuisine to downtown.
We have a community now that's really fighting to change the perception that we have.
And then a marketing miracle happened. Stroll on State, a 30-block winter wonderland extravaganza that included a giant Christmas tree, ice skating, a Santa parade, and an elaborate holiday light display synchronized to music along the banks of the Rock River.
Back in the day when I started out, I felt like I had to beg every single person to come in. It's not like that anymore.
Stroll on State was expected to draw about 5,000 people. Instead, in its first year, 40,000 people came. Now in its 3rd year, more than 65,000 people flooded downtown the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And that's great news for the Stieber family, who stuck it out. Adam Stieber got a new job and was even able to buy a home.
If you would ask me 3 years ago if I saw myself owning a home today, I would have probably thought you were crazy. It was hard going through, but definitely worth it.
And that wraps up our show tonight. You are now in the loop. For Chris Bury and Barbara Pinto, I'm Lauren Cohn. Good night.